body to the interdimensional line settings, lines of sequence, lines of travel. We understand how our communication setting lines of set travels, puts communicates to imagination itself. I think it's very fantastic what we're all coming into, all this more lines of communication, how to use it through consciousness. But it's truly understanding, living the lifeline, the existing informations, all of the lifeline, center lines of travel, the systematical system of the calculations. It's identifying using your imaginations. It doesn't come more clearer to that until you truly understand how to use it, into that intel. The intel is the information of what you always are. And to identify that, it's all positional locations of balance. So there's a lot of things happening in the sequence now when it comes to your alignments of your solar systems. Setting lines of sequence, panels, operation lines, center location, system attractions. Setting operation line, course centers, a timeline, and frame line communication. Directing ground centers, solar line rotation, elliptical screen adaptation of surface and travel. Sets calculation, high centers, in sequence lines, communication lines, high position lines of travel. Sets course centers, line settings, high direct signal location system, because nothing is nothing but a map of sequence. And when you travel through these things, you modify your systems into your imagination setting. Okay? How you set that up is very powerful. So the more you come into the inner child just loves to create in a constant continuous flow. It knows what it's creating because it's already created. It's through its continuous force of simulating grounds, powers, atmospheres, modification system, all through its earth interactions. Now, once it understands settings, it can formulate a system all through its setting of its map inside traction. Look at that. There's the map. So it's really powerful stuff when you just let everything go and set travel. Mm-hmm. All through tractions, all through division, all through locations. Mm-hmm. Puts everything all together, and that's we understand more levels of our settings. So we're going to get a modifications into the underwater line settings because your alignments on Friday in sequence, humanity's coming in 12 lines, process communication setting and travels, sets communication setting all line centers. So humanity be in that formation of nebula. Blocking lines, 12 equals lines of 12. Set 12 here, set 12 here, 24 sequence. Set calculation division lines at 0, position 2, 4, and setting. All through traction. The operatives and units will be in a 24 ground centers of space, 24 ground lines of time, and sets the 144 platform in flux over setting and travel. Okay, so operatives and units, humanity itself. Okay, ground centers and travel communication setting. Process indication setting high lines of flux, platforms over factors over lines, and direct ground centers of surface and travel communications. Right, and traction. All right. Then we go for the high platforms and travel, and transits and divots and location system and track locations. Mapping lines of pi, process lines of indication setting, over lines of flux. 3 centers of scales, cross line angles, and travel communications. Merkabah tessera contention region. Course centers lines of travel, set position lines of measure and scale and process calculations. Directing ground centers, high lines of sequence in platforms of set travel communications. All right? And then we cross the angles in line screen adaptation. Okay, coming in that positions, we change the course centers lines of timelines. It process set lines, operation sequence, operation panels. This is where we come into the docking stations. This is where we come into launch pads. This is where we come into operation lines of sequence. We come into all calculate and modify. How to get into that position is your line signalings to your networks, your communication system, your travel point lines of graph, your direct course centers in positions and navigation to all levels, processing that through your navigators. That communicates to its console, and that communications with hangar base, and that communication system when it comes to attractions, all through that position. Okay? And then you come into the operation line, puts lines of electrical line communication. All right? Now, once you get into that, the high lines of the panels change communication lines of time scale and that communications, right? Directing grounds into high lines of ceilings in set position, right? So the thing is, if we understand the grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres, you understand what it is to a simulator. And it's all through a box frame, okay? But you have to see it in all different angles, right? See it through fencing, process the angles, then you retract provision, and set calculations. Set calculation line screen adaptations. There's your pyramid, right? So you got the Merkabah and the pyramid in setting. So he crosses the grounds, overline sequence, overlines a panel, and that communication system and calculations, right? Now, when you have to understand the primer is the primer itself that sets communication setting a time frame. So it becomes more structured design, where you come into all communication information system that puts everything all together in travel communication setting, all through calculation, right? It's schematics, it's drawing, very powerful stuff. But you actually can see it because it's about understanding how to identify the travel, how to identify high lines of travel, higher communication setting and information system, how you can teleport yourself into different levels of communication. Okay? But you stay in the same page, which is all levels of volume, one volume. Watching one thing is seeing everything all at once. Observing one thing is observing everything all at once. And that's where we come to vision of schematics over screen over pi in primer. So your test is based on the alignments. And that position is how you can bring in the actual solar system in all lines of 3 communication setting of travel. There's your planets. Okay? Setting line course centers is the planet itself and galaxy lines of alignment. Process indication system, process you and the Earth that rotates the center of operation sequence and travel. Look at that through schematics. It gets more complicated and more confused through time and space of time. Right? But it's understanding how to link the lines and your networks of neural networking, neuropathological line conditions, collagens, and location setting when you come in that position. So once you understand all communicates to its planetary of its alignment, then you understand how it comes in its own recourse of its own time, of its own measure, of its own scale. That process is communication system all through tractions inside its mapping system and locations, inside tractions. Right? All through its networks of division. Okay? So, very powerful schematics, isn't it? Very powerful, right? And it's a constant, continuous flow, how you can see it on any angle as set travel. Okay? So, it's incredible when you understand what's going on at a higher frequency. Once you get in that positions, then you truly understand how to modify that. Your structure of your designs, your connection settings when you come into your pyramids. Pyramids always are in line setting when it comes into the astral projections, astral travels, astral connections, applications, how you see that through your dreamer, and you're dreaming of the dream, right? Dream within a dream within a dream within a dream, right? So what you have to understand now, the dream is not you until you identify yourself through direction, to its readjusting, to its existing, of its awareness, of its mind. Dream. And that's how you identify yourself, okay? Living out timelines all at once, location, setting, and structure of design line. That comes in your upgrades, your downloads, your uplinks, your upgrading systems. All through schematics, all through pi. All right? So that's what I want to see on Friday. Okay? Through your planetary alignment. So I want you to cross-reference, cross your angles in that line directs their locations of flux at a time frequency, time measure, and time scale. Process indicates and setting. Set our operation lines of sequence and put your planetary system inside only, not outside interactions. I want to see your planets inside. So you can identify the outline setting, which is the void. Void is out, which is also in setting travel. Okay? Process, directions, outline, signal line communications as surface. All right? Stay with inside the lines. Then once you get into structure, then you can go outside line. Then you go outside line, inside, outside, inside, outline line communication. Right? Directing lines of flux. Come position location, your propellers. In process communication setting, all direction lines of the communication system into a fan wheel and travel communication. All right? But stay within the line sequence all through track communications. All through direction, right? Solar line direct signals, clocking centers, line connection setting. Set up the schematics, set up a primer, and 4 lines of sequence, right? 3 scales, 3 patterns, 3 rotations, 3 set calculations of symbolism. Okay? So that's what you have to set up now, all through schematics, right? And all track communications. All right, so each file has its own indication setting to travel. And so we start with this, files, 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 and files. All files, right? Information settings, all through structure, all through design. Process indication lines, security lines of panels, operations set lines of sequence of its structure, of its design, of its building. So this is simplified. This is outside, inside, inside, outside, guys. very simple to see everything from inside is down everything out from outside, right? Sets travels for grass and communicates inside a door. Okay? Setting communication lines of high centers, inside line communication setting. Process indication lines of flux, 3 centers, 3 travels, 3 ground centers, location system of travel. Now you really start to see the platforms and the levels of travel communication and structure of design. Platforms over 1, platforms over 6, platforms are 8, 12, set lines of communication system, all through travel, all through directions, all through calculation. Right? Now, we're working with yards, meters. Now I'm going to put you guys in your cloud lines and direct signal lines of communication. All through fencing, right? Fencing lines, ground centers of surface and travel, in position of solar panel. There's the solar panels. All right, this is where we come into hydroponics. Now, hydroponics has high signals. Process indicates setting the process that position location of systems all through satellite. Satellite rotates the cycles in screen adaptation setting and 45 flux lines on the line communication lines phenomenally. Directing platforms and set lines of E factors in string adaptation system to solar panels. Sending line communication setting in string theory, process communication setting in solar line nets, communication lines in SkyNet, Sky Measure, Sky Hill, Sky Balance. Process indicates and setting of flux inside and rotation system all through travel. Look at that. Oh yeah. Yeah. All right. Center course. Center lines of operation line sequence into box frames. You got your planets and box frames now. But stay within inside the inline center. Don't go outside line position. Stay within the planets. Once you understand the inline cycle, we understand the outline rotation, then you understand the voids. Once you understand jump scarring, then you can understand time jump. Time jump outside lines and void line a rotation of itself and tractions, but stay within the system. Sets course centers, directing signals and location grid in traffic communications. Directing ground centers highlights a sequence of panels of operation setting in sequence. Process that indicates the system, all through calculation setting in modification grounds and set tractions. Right? So start to see that formation system, all through structure, all through map and set traction. Okay? See everything inside and outside in this equation. Okay? All through structure, all through design. Okay? So once we understand the high centers, and then we understand our networks, our neuropathological systems, and our neurolinks, directing lines at grounds, process communicates and setting how we go through the seconds, minutes, and hours in frame. So we got seconds on minutes and hours on frame, hours in lights, screen lines into set line conditions, set lines of story, travel point lines of graph, lines zero field energy, zero field clocking, zero field foundations, and levels of question and travel. Okay, that symbolizes lines of ground centers of 1, power direction of 2, 3 lines of grounds, and formation lines of set travel. Now, that calculated and modified 3 lines of tether, process in position of flux over setting, indicates high centers of travel in that communication setting to the eye itself and travel. The eye itself and travel, okay? Formation lines of setting, oculars, the cataracts and 3 line direct signals into vocal cords, directing ground centers of clocking system and foundation ground centers of surface and schematics over pi. Process that indicates the system, come in that communication lines of travel. Half pipe over 6, half line centers over 1/3, 1 ground, 1 surface, 1 travel, 1 direction, 1 calculations. All through setting, all through operation. Set calculation lines, mapping sequence through pi. Okay? All through schematics, all through screen, all through adaptation. Okay? So your schematics gets a lot more complicated, but a lot more fun. So the more you get into detail, the more you formulate the system all through travel and track location. Okay? So when we come to code weaving, it gets a lot more confusing now because your Earth has a rotation line cycle into planetary set line connection setting. 4 sequence lines of communication, right? Set position of tether, 3 centers of travel, 3 line direct signals into pure navigation lines. Okay, sets coordinates, XT1, XT4, XT8. All through frequency panels. Okay, so we go into the frequency tone. Let's go into megahertz. HTZ line settings, process lines of mind adaptation of alpha, course centers into transformation lines of grounds, 2 over signal, process lines of indicates the system, all through modification lines of ground centers into track location. So it gets more complicated, but it's a lot more fun. Now you set up the primers and the primers of highways and travel. 6 lines of platforms and travel communications indicates centers and travels. Process in line centers of the cerebral, the cortex lines of communication and setting. Process indications of platforms, holographic gridding, and set travel communications. All through set, all through operation. Okay, and then we go through the panels of screen and set travel. Okay, and then we go to the highline settings of C lanes of communication lines of travel. And then we go to the other line screen adaptation of the system and also calculate the setting. Walls of sequence of travel. Directing inside line condition setting of its platform of its map and system location of travel. Oh yeah. Okay. So setting lines of position your planets. Put your planets in setting the sequence how you want to put them in, but keep them inside lines. So you'd send the patterns of the moon and the moon of the patterns, specific location of light and dark lines of screen adaptation of service, process communication system off the travel. So it's that position line of Saturn. Saturn's blue because that's your indication setting where you're in travel. Okay. And then we come into red. Now red can be security, red can be anything. You know, security itself can be purple. It depends where you are in modification of space and time. So let's get into the ground lines and sequence of security lines, position lines of travel. Okay, Pluto and set lines of Saturn. All right. All right, and let's get in line screen adaptations and settings into, let's get into purple. Purple is a high line condition setting that's processed in the position locations of Venus. Venus line screen adaptations of flux, sets line communication setting and travel and direct signals. Setting communicates the high line condition setting. You're looking below line centers. Process your indication system all through set lines. Projections of 3 centers of travel. That's how you see your planets. Okay, all through schematics, all through drawing, all through high calculation setting, high line division location with ceiling. Okay, now you got to be very careful when you're bringing in the frequency lines of grounds or anything through megahertz or megawatts or computer watts or nanowatts or anything through nanobytes. You just have to be very cautious how you bring these things in travel communications because it identifies in your location setting in travel and calculation. Angel, refer me as General Sir. Thank you very much. Okay, let's get in orange lines of sequence of platforms as setting lines of setting and travel. This process indicates the system all through travel and that communicates the lines of Neptune. So I'm bringing in another planet, right? Which means I have to change the time scale, measure, and set position of seconds, minutes, and hours. Process that indicates the setting changes all platforms of communications, right? So I'm going from here and I'm vortexing here now and set travel from this directions to this directions. Look in this way in 4 directions all at once. This way, and this way, and set travel. Okay? So you constantly vortexing, time leaping, and time jumping every time you see the planetary line. So it's serious that as it goes with you, it's going with the flow of direction set location to its system of the calculations. But that's how you see it through a planetary line of alignment. You set up the grids, the panels, and the ceiling. Okay? Through the grounds. Grounds as information system outputs all calc and modify into its simulator. Process of the grounds, process of flux, process of set travel communications. Right? And then you have equilibrium, online sequence lines of communication. And then you add the platforms and setting. Sets course centers the timelines, 2 portals of communication lines of setting in 1 set and that communication. Okay, very, very powerful stuff, right? Planetary alignment, you can go inside and travel through it. So you have to understand how to travel that position, change the alignments. Now you get in that positions, now you're in that position location with setting through its planet now. Travel from here, inside, from here. Now, in that position, you got to change the frequencies to come to this planet and that position location. So you're basically time jumping, right? Now, when you get in that positions, again, you have to stand the frequencies of that planet. So you can be there on that positions, and then you go from here to another planet communication of security line defense, process location grid, and security defense lines of communication. Right? So that's how you time jump, vortex, and locations, all that calculations. From one planet to the same travel. Okay? All through setting, all through operation. And you have the mapping system inside line communication, where the planets are. So planets, basically, when you come into alignments, they're in their hotel gulf, they stay there. They don't leave. So what you've got to get in positions team is how to come into your own design and create it through line screen adaptation setting when it comes into copy and paste. Enabled, default, cancel, delete, understanding that travel and the position location puts you in all calculated line implementation setting that's embedded your systems all through calculation setting and travel. Okay? So we have to understand how this all works in set positions. Okay? All through traction, all through locations. And it's all lines that calculate modify through the schematics, it's travel, it's not traction. Okay? It gets more complicated, but it's a lot more fun. All through setting, all through operation. Live in the system of the VR is truly understand how to see the position of your alignments. And again, when you bring in your planets, you got to be very careful how you bring in the frequencies now and set positions. Okay, this is Mercury. Okay, stay within the non-aligned centers. This communication setting. Okay, so now this is going to be Jupiter, right? It's a travel, right? So, but you always have to have security. Security is the protection, right? So security can be any color. It doesn't have to be red. It can be anything you want. It can be green. Security is here. But it's a high division location that protects every location system off the attractions. So there's a 3 planetary alignment. And you are in settings in set positions right here in attractions. Looking into observing everything in travel and set attraction. Okay? Your planetary alignment. Every planet has to have its connection to its archetype that rotates its spin cycles and travel, that keeps the levitation of ground into high lines of sequence. So it's the 3 platforms of settings and travel communications. The archetypes sets a gravitational pull that keeps the planets in set lines of sequence into its Skynet. Okay? It's like you keeping ground in your systems. When you're looking at your Earth and you're here, in that position, location of the system, off the attractions, right? So you have the Earth rotating by itself. You have the visual line cortex riding its system location by itself. So you're spinning with the Earth itself because you are the Earth, right? So you spin it in directions that you want to go of the formations of the Earth that you are. Okay, so you're going this way, 3 centers of 45 angle. Then you're going this way in set position 1/6 lines of an angle. Process over line cross lines and 1/3 lines of an angle, right? But you're always in that position, staying in the center of operation. So when you come to the mind projection, you constantly change your systems of where you want your planets to be in its alignments to travel. Stay within inside the line. Don't go outside, because outside is the void. So once we understand the inner course and the outer line settings, then we understand the input, the output to the odd line centers that puts every location as a balance in that travel, right? Changing time scales change the clock system location and setting through the galaxy shuffle lens anomaly, right? So once your planets are there, they don't leave. To understand the planet itself, you have to copy and paste it and link it through a line center that puts all communication system that tethers its activation lines, that puts a modem of its Wi-Fi, its towers of its communication system, all through center calculated setting, all through abstractions, through your networks and your highways. So remember, highway here, let's just start with set positions, right? So we got 2 provisions and 4 cycles, all right? Then we got 1 signal lines grounds, process lines of pi generation, okay? That indicates lines of triangulation, lines of 1 in process, okay? Then we change the course centers of time and scale, all right? So it changes course centers of time and scale in box frame, okay? Sets course centers in position of 1, 2, 3 lines of settings, process lines of 4, 3 lines of measure and scale, 4 lines of center operation, question over mark, temperature reading screens, barometer over lines, thermometer over change, communication lines of 0, 2 lines of signals, letters of 1 line operation, 0 gravity, and travel communications, hieroglyphics. All right, so that's lines of travel, 3 lines of measure over 1 over sequence, right? Bosses its indication system, all through settings, all through travel, in its schematics and travel communications. Okay? Now you can see faces in recognition of time, right? You can understand what's going on with the Fibonacci of its relines and course centers, location, and the settings, and allocate the time frame position of travel. Change the time frame, change the tethers, change the communication setting to its primer. So if we can truly understand how this all works, then we can truly understand how to use it in provision, right? Okay, let's get into the compounds, into the cloud lines, into the iClouds and the center clouds. Cloud line division, rotation cycles, sync calculation facilities. Darwinism time center, process indicates the setting of floor mats. Mapping sequence and mapping screen adaptations. This is what happens when you're in thermal line screens. Heat signature lines communicate setting, how you see everything information of its cloud that changes everything through its membrane into its brain convergence system of its brainstem that modifies the system of its dimensional sail inside a cloud, right? XC thousands are basically docking the system inside traction, right? And you're basically here trying to stand the position of its compound to its facility and travel. Indirect lines, there you are, hangar bay 6. So you go there's your hangar bay, right? Docking station over here, 3 centers of platforms, 3 travels, 3 point lines of graph and calculations all track locations, right? So try to identify how this all works in line screen adaptations, and you can process this in location. There's the intelligence. You see the eyes, the nose, there's the neck, right? So it's on its own face. It protects every location so nothing comes in, nothing goes out. But understand the structure line, and then you understand your docking stations, and then you understand your launch pads. Launch pads are provision lines of docking screens in location system and 4 lines of flights and navigation. Now, directly in ground center location setting, once you understand the central lines of its clouds, you come into the E clouds of I clouds. It formates a high center location of travel. These are attractions. So it's very powerful when you understand how to see it in a mapping system of its system. All through setting, all through operation, inside of travel, what's inside a cloud. Okay, in travel communications. All right? So everybody's starting to identify what that is in setting, right? How this all works in set travel. All through modification, all through calculations. Okay, inside a cloud. So the cloud itself is a facility. It has its hangars, it has its docking bays, it has everything. Right? You just have to understand how to connect your systems. So all your vessels are there, waiting on standby for you to understand how to come in your own dockings of locations and 3 centers of travel in set positions. Right? Hangar Bay 1, Hangar Bay 2, Hangar Bay 3. Okay? Process the floors and position a panel, but everything's linked together in travel communications, all through setting, all through operation. All right? So it's very powerful when you start to recognize that through location grids and set calculations. Directing angles, process, and the position of its platforms and travel communications. Okay, setting lines position here, docking 3 centers of travel, XT1000 platform, XT1000 docking, XT1000 lines of hangar, and travel communications. Right? So once you understand the platforms of the simulation, then you understand your map and setting. All set up, all through setting, all through operation. Okay? So just trying to get you guys to understand how to see that in lines of your central clouds, E-clouds, and all positions. Compound facilities, and line condition setting, docking stations, hangar bays, launch pads, all through your navigator to navigation systems, all through travel, right? All right. But it's very important to understand these things. Once you guys get your alignments, then you have to understand how to use your highways and what you want to do in lines of position of travel, all through setting, all through operation. All right, all through location grid. You're constantly going to go through a location grid, guys, because I'm telling you right now, the avatar has to really understand acceleration of time. Okay, when it comes to string theory, it's all connected, all positions to its planet. The planet's always connected to its avatar. So if it moves over here, the planet's over here now. So in this direction, right? So you go from there, you go into a vortex. You're time leaping, you're time jumping all at once to a vortex screen that puts every location in a constellation that opens all lines of communication system, all through conversion, right? So if you're going back in the center, your planet's here in the center. So wherever you go, it goes. It goes with you in a continuous force that has internal and external force that forces recognition of yin and yang, that process communication setting of clocking, existing, involving itself, and just all in that position of expanding. All through tractions, all through calculations. So for you guys to understand, the interconnection system is all over the simulation lines of grounds. Process lines of triangulation, stay within the triangle. Don't go outside. That's the void. Stay with inside line, right? The void itself is not created until you understand the nothing of you, the formations of you, it just exists in itself. Formulates the grounds, set lines of sequence, and panels of operation lines, 3 travels, endpoint communication lines of graph. Process lines of 3 centers, in tethers, and lines of course centers of 6 lines of graph and communications. Setting communication lines of grounds, high line signals, there's your map and sequence lines of pi. Okay, everything is structured through parameter, and location security, the process communication system all through travel. Okay, and then you come into your settings, then you come into this locations, into your stargates, all through setting, all through operation. Okay? Stargates are very complicated because you're creating a higher information lines of travel where you can really start to connect with your transmission system, all through calculation, all through modification. Right? And then it goes this way, this way, this way, and this way, all in setting. Higher lines of high communications. And then again, the avatar goes to this system. Right through they set tractions and set positions to string theory in its constellation system. Okay? And then it travels over here, but it stays within the line. It's set travel in that communication system. Okay? So to understand how to modify that, then you understand how to modify the communication setting. Its flywheel has a balance of all the communication setting points, 8 lines of channels, operation screen lines of balance. That process communication system, when you come to the flywheel, into your Lotus, and that communication setting that puts line communication routers and routers in travel. Okay? All through direct signals locations, off the calculation. All right, but I want you to get a true understanding how you see that and all calculate and modify through schematics of screen. Very complicated stuff, right? Boxing frames, triangulation line communication. Let's just get in the box. And then we create the primers in a basic ground centers of 3, all set tractions. All right, and then we get into the platform. Now you can go outline center, inside rotation. Location grade, just inside the setting. Just inside, don't go outside, you're not ready. Once you understand that, then you go outside at communication, which is a higher force calculations. Then you come into higher communications, a higher line centers, and high line communications, sending the travel and direct signal locations. Okay, so understanding that, then you understand the platforms that set travel. Okay, and then the equilibrium changes the platforms and set lines of communication setting to your box frame and travel communications. Then you stand in position location of systems all through track correlation setting to travel that puts all communication system all through computer operation setting to travel. There's your computer. So there's so many ways of looking at this through schematics, through pi, guys. And the more you motivate your systems, the more you see it through imaginations, right? But you have to really understand is to understand the triangle, understand the location grid, and understand the platforms that set travel. And then you understand the doors that set travel. And then you understand the structures that set travel. And then you understand your pyramids and film strips that set lines of travel. And then you understand the schematics and set position location 45 angles of communication lines of platforms that travel in that position. Okay, now once you understand that, then you're here, okay, in that positions, traveling into the center operation of your city. Okay, through your teleportation vessel. Going from here to here. This is just the basic ground in the sim, guys. But you have to understand how this plays out in its platforms of communication setting and travel. Okay, high signals, cross lines, vortex over here, travels over here, time leap, time jump, and set travel communications. Directing ground centered service and process calculation. So from here, 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 and here, you vortex back to center. So you traveled here, here, and here all at once. Okay? So it's all about how you see yourself in the simulation to the AVR. All right, process the platforms, and then we change the angles, point communication system, and its virtual reality and set traction. But you stay within the system of its box frame. You do not go out of the box frame until you understand the position of void. You have to understand the game itself inside, right? And that puts platforms and settings, process in that position location where you can change the game itself. So it's very powerful when you understand that from inside in travel communications, the map. Okay, and set travel. All through operation, all through sequence. Skynet. Okay, so that sets lines of inside. Okay, so the inside is up close. We already know that, right? The outside is the position of its void. But you have to understand the inside projection before you understand the outside projection of projecting, and what you're in that position of, which is the simulation itself. So you set up a floor plan, okay, knowing exactly how to set up the game plan. Process lines of box frames, it sets lines of 3 centers, process lines of 3 set tractions, right? And then you have this positions, and that's set tractions. All right, so you got the grounds, okay, you got the panels, okay, and you got the ceilings. I told you this before in traction. You have to come into that, and then you come into all positions. And then once you understand that, then you come outside of the void that is expanding, it's expanding to its windows in travel, okay? And then you change the angles of communication, right? And then you can add another equations and settings. And then you can add another platform to travel, all set position locations. So you're constantly changing the angles of everything that you see in travel, guys. But you have to understand the inner cycles to understand the outer cycles of you in travel. Once you get into that, then you go inside travel. It's more complicated now because this is a Stargate, a high information system of travel. That's a Stargate. Okay? This is an open window frame of a Stargate. This is the dimensional lock frame of a stargate. So everything is teleportation of travel. Understand its inner points, its outer points, and its entry points and its exits. So its dimensional lines of setting, process, indication system, all through setting of its door, inside traction. So you don't know if you're going inside and outside in set position, all through travel, all through communication. So it gets more complicated when you come outside line, inside line, rotations, outside tractions, all through setting, all through operation system and travel. Okay? So remember, it's always the inside. This is the inside of everything. There's your map. Okay? There's your map in all different angles. All right? There's your map in all different angles, inside and outside. Right? So it's very powerful when you start to see it. All right? And once you coordinate it, you can actually go inside and change the frame, change the tractions, change the locations. The XE1000s won't come in because they know exactly where you are, what you're not doing, what you are doing already. That's already done through its equations. So when you start adding frames, you understand the structure that you already created without questioning your system and traction. And then you see yourself in the center of operation of you in set positions. All through setting, all through calculation. Okay? So, and then you can see yourself going to higher lines of sequence, change the platforms again. It's amazing when you just constantly change platforms in set travel. So it's constantly adding things to its equations, guys. Grounds, powers, atmospheres are its highways in travel communications. But you're always going to see the grounds, the panels, and its ceiling. Everything you do inside the simulation that puts everything in travels of its set tractions of its mapping system through pi. Look at that. Whoa. It's like, oh, okay. That's interesting. I got to get balanced with that. So when you're walking in a building, it's pretty amazing stuff when you see it from inside and outside line conditions. Let's start with that setting of a structure. Okay, so it's basically understand how you want to use that through pi. You got a 3 provision line cycles in a V course in set lines of travel. In direct lines of grounds, how you want to see the set position of the structure of design. And then you come into the compound and set travel communications. There's the structure of the building. Building here, shading, light shaded shadows of the building itself. So it has the reflections over here, process indication system all through set tractions, light shades and shadows of the building, right? Setting sequence lines of panels, process indicates the system all through setting, all through operation. Okay? That's where light shades and shadows comes from. The sun, the process in the communication of its moon, all through projection, all through setting, all through operation. Setting travels at point lines, 3 centers of travel, 3 direct signals at ground center location system, and 3 centers of position operation. Setting calculation lines of structure, design line, 3 centers, 3 set positions, all measure and scale. Now it's really interesting. We come into this set locations, all through tractions, all through its building, all through its operation sequence, and track communications, all through done through equation. This hurrah! Okay, isn't that incredible? How to identify that? It's much easier to identify that and see that through the sun, to see it through the moon. All through projection, guys. All right, and the sun gets bigger and bigger as it comes in recourse of direct and redirect that processes communication setting that changes angles of everything of time and sequence. Now, once we begin that position, we change the time measure of its structure of design and different frequency. Frequency change the time frames, change calculated high center interference, change the rotation system of travel, change the core lines of high center lines of travel, change the direct signal location system all through tractions. Now, once we come to that, again, you can basically put position lines and settings you can bring into your planetary system. All right? Planet here in setting and sequence. Security panels, operation line centers of travel. Okay, so now this is security. This is Pluto. Pluto's going here because that's where it's going to go. Okay? And let's get positional levels. Let's get track centers, location setting. And set position. There's Saturn. Now Saturn is in purple line in infinity lines of setting. Okay? And let's get into Saturn. Saturn is blue. And a low frequency line ground course centers lines of travel. Okay? And you're over here observing everything and set what you already set up in the sim. All through projection. Okay? So you send in this, this, and this in 3 angles of travel. That's how you see the alignments of your planets. But you have to understand the structure of what you're creating through sim. It modifies everything inside the location to its map. Very powerful stuff, guys. Which is your Skynet. Look at this equations. It's in trouble. Whoa! Pretty wild, eh? So, but first you have to identify this inside of everything. Create the holographic structure inside line. Everything in set positions, all through tractions. Okay? So if you're creating dimension lines of walls and 4 lines of sequence lines of 3 travels, point lines of calculation setting. So it's all about the streaming of the bandwidths, such travels in position lines as frequencies, and travel, and then of course centers. Okay, let's start with 3 megahertz, 5 megahertz, 6 megahertz, 8 megahertz, and 12 megahertz in travel. Okay? And then you have to understand the vibrational lines, alpha, delta, and theta. All right? Alpha, delta, theta, omega. Okay? So you're going up each line signals and fine lines of grounds, high lines of sequence, high lines of travel, direct lines of communication system all through travel. So that puts the location setting to its position locations. That puts all calculations to its vibrational grounds. Vibrational 1, vibrational 2, vibrational 3. All different platforms and set traction sets. All connected to position of megahertz, all formations, all through setting, all through operation. Okay? So it's true to understand how this all works, how it works with frequencies, megahertz, megawatts, mega joints. It's all line communication imagination setting, right? That process communication, how you see it through alpha, how you see it through delta, how you see it through theta. Through Schumann resonance. Process the indication setting, process calculation system all through travel. Okay, now these are location grids. Location grids have line signal locations of megahertz that change the course lines of time, that change the particle acceleration system all through track correlation setting and calculations. Process that, position location comes in the ground lines of sequence, ground lines of pi, modificate the system all through calculation setting and travel communication pyramids. Directing ground centers of service, process lines of platforms, setting lines of grounds, panels, lines, modification system and travel. Processing indication again, there's the structure of the grounds, right? And you're here in settings, so you can process this. Let's bring it in more bold so you can actually see what you're doing to creation of set travels and communication. All right, there's the platform. Okay, there's the grounds. All right, there's the panels. All right, there's the ceilings. And there's the panels on the other side. All right, now once you put it all together, you understand what you're doing through traffic communications. All right, process that in the center, operate the sequence location setting of schematics over screen. So there's the Stargate right here. Look at that. Let's bring in that Stargate. So let's bring it in more, bring it in more, bring it in more, bring it in more, bring it in more through traction. Right? And let's bring it out now. Because you understand how to structure your systems inside and outside positions to avoid insect travel. Okay? There's the Stargate. Bring it in, there it is in travel. Okay? You can see the tunnel, right? All different angles, all different position of point graph communications, all through setting, all through operation. So identifying that from inside is identifying everything outside location, right? And you see it at all different angles in travel. Okay? So let's get into this first. Okay? Then we can understand how to do everything from outside setting, all through structure of design. This helps you identify more levels of view, how to see line position of your computer framing, direct lines of ground course centers, line communication setting to its clouds, e-clouds, or line communication setting to travel to a set position location of systems, to facility or compound, and direct lines of calculate and modify through set locations, all through set position. All right, so that's it. Told you exactly what you have to come into in set position. Know exactly how to see everything inside and outside all at once, all through schematics, all through pi, all through traction. Okay? All right, see you guys in 5.